We have to do things. So in the film, we talked about the soil collections. We're going to lynching sites, and it seems kind of silly to people, but what I've seen happen up close is really powerful. We just did one not too long ago, and there was a middle-aged black woman who came, and she was unhappy because her sister didn't come with her, and she wasn't sure she would go out by herself without her sister. And we had our meeting like you saw in the film, and she kind of got fired up, and she said, I'm going to go. And we gave her the jar, and we gave her the implement, and we gave her the memo to describe the lynching. And she went to this lynching site. It was in this remote place in West Alabama, and she parked her car. It was on a dirt road. And as soon as she got out to start digging, she said a man drove by in a pickup truck, big white guy. And he drove by and he slowed down and he saw her there. And then he turned around and he drove back by and he looked at her. And then he turned around and he drove by a third time. And then he got out of his truck. And she said she got so nervous. And we tell people when you're doing this, you don't have to explain to them what you're doing. You can say you're just getting dirt for your garden if you want to. And she said that's what she decided to do. And this man started walking over to her. And just as she expected, the man came up to her and he said, what are you doing? And she said she was going to tell him she was just getting dirt for her garden. But when she talked to us later, she said, but when I was there and he asked me that question, she said, something just got a hold of me. And the next thing I knew, I told him, I am digging soil at this site because this is where a black man was lynched in 1931, and I'm going to honor his memory. And she said she started digging real fast because she didn't know. And she said the man stood there, and at some point said, does that paper talk about the lynching? And she said, yes. And then he said, can I read it? And she said, yes. And she gave him the paper, and she was still digging. And she said the man read the paper, put the paper down, and did something that shocked her. She said, the man said, excuse me, but can I help you? Then he got down on his knees and she offered him the little implement we give people to dig the soil. He said, no, 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 you keep that. And then she said he just threw his hands into the soil with such force, and he just threw his hands, and his hands were turning black with the soil, and he was putting it in the jar. And she said there was something about the way he was just throwing his hands into the soil that moved her. And before she realized it, she was crying. And the man looked at her and he said, oh, I'm so sorry, am I upsetting you? And she said, no, you're blessing me. And they kept digging and they kept digging, and they got near the top, and she noticed that the man was slowing down, and then she looked at him and he was shaking. And then she saw that there were tears running down his face. And she said, are you okay? And he said, no, I'm just so worried that it might have been my people, my grandparents that lynched this man. And she said they both sat on the roadside for 20 minutes just crying. And at the end of it, he took a picture of her holding the jar, and she took a picture of him holding the jar. And it's not always the case that beautiful things happen when we put ourselves in position to do truth acts. But if we don't do truth acts, we deny ourselves the opportunity for that kind of reconciliation, that kind of hopefulness. And that's what we have to do. And we have opportunities every day of our lives, in our workplace, in our political places, in our social places, to actually engage in acts of truth-telling. And for me, that's the challenge that we face in this country.